So welcome everybody to the video that I am making now for a class today in lieu of synchronous class today. We'll do asynchronous today. So you'll notice I've set up a discussion in the in the D2L page for our class based on some of the things that I'll go over here in this discussion. So one of the things I want to start us out with is a little video. It's a TED Talk by somebody named James Randi. And James Randi was a magician, and he decided his career took a different turn when he realized that a lot of the time people were fairly easily duped or fooled by certain kinds of propaganda or certain kinds of myths or certain kinds of conspiracy theories. And here, so I'll bring up this video of him kind of sharing a little bit about that. And we won't watch the whole talk, of course, but I just want to highlight a few parts of it, especially really the first 5 minutes or so. All right, here we go. Fast forward a little bit.
I have a very peculiar background, attitude, and approach to the real world because I am a conjurer. Now, I prefer that term over magician because if I were a magician, that would mean that I use spells and incantations and weird gestures in order to accomplish real magic. No, I don't do that. I'm a conjurer who is someone who pretends to be a real magician. Now,
So one of the reasons why I'm playing this video is because one of the issues that we face, especially when we're thinking about public health, is an issue of belief or an issue of trust or distrust. Sometimes misplaced trust, sometimes misplaced distrust. Right? So who is the public going to believe when it comes to certain kinds of development in research and pharmaceuticals? All right, here we go.
how do we go about that sort of thing? We depend on the fact that audiences such as yourselves will make assumptions. For example, when I walked up here and I took the microphone from the stand and switched it on, you assumed this was a microphone, which it is not. As a matter of fact, this is something that about half of you, more than half of you, will not be familiar with. It's a beard trimmer, you see, and makes a very bad microphone. I've tried it many times. The other assumption that you made, and this little lesson is to show you that you will make assumptions, not only that you can, but that you will when they are properly suggested to you.
I'm going to pause it right here, just to point out that assumptions are things we simply have to make assumptions in some cases, right? Well, in most cases, our lives are filled with assumptions, right? So assumptions aren't in and of themselves bad. However, they can be used to manipulate us, and some of our assumptions can be gravely mistaken. All right, so James Randi continues.
Believe I'm looking at you. Wrong. I'm not looking at you. I can't see you. I know you're out there. They told me backstage that it's a full house and such. I know you're there because I can hear you, but I can't see you because I normally wear glasses. These are not glasses. These are empty frames. Quite empty frames. Now, why would a grown man appear before you wearing empty frames on his face? To fool you, ladies and gentlemen, to deceive you, to show that you, too, can make assumptions. Don't you ever forget that. Now, I have to do something, first of all, switch to real glasses so I can actually see you, which would probably be a convenience. I don't know. I haven't had a good look. Well, it's not that great a convenience. I have to do something now which seems a little bit strange for a magician, but I'm going to take some medication. This is a full bottle of Calms Forte. I'll explain that in just a moment. Ignore the instructions. That's what the government has to put in there to confuse you, I'm sure. I will take enough of these. Indeed, the whole container.
So in case you weren't following, he just basically ingested the entire container of that medication. All right, so here we go.
32 tablets of Calms Forte. Now that I've done that, I'll explain it in a moment. I must tell you that I am an actor. I'm an actor who plays a specific part. I play the part of a magician, a wizard, if you will, a real wizard. If someone were to appear on this stage in front of me and actually claim to be an ancient prince of Denmark named Hamlet, you would be insulted, and rightly so. Why would a man assume that you would believe something bizarre like this? But there exists out there a very large population of people who will tell you that they have psychic, magical powers, that they can predict the future, that they can make contact with the deceased. Oh, they also say they will sell you astrology or other fortune-telling methods. Oh, they gladly sell you that, yes. And they also say that they can give you perpetual motion machines and free energy systems. They claim to be psychics or sensitives, whatever they claim. But the one thing that has made a big comeback just recently is this business of speaking with the dead. Now, to my innocent mind, dead implies incapable of communicating. You might agree with me on that.
All right, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit.
They tend to people use exactly the same gimmicks that we magicians do, exactly the same physical methods, the same psychological methods. And they effectively and profoundly deceive millions of people around the earth to their detriment. They deceive these people, cost them a lot of money, cost them a lot of emotional anguish. Billions of dollars are spent every year all over the globe on these charlatans. Now,
so pay attention to the amount of money that goes into this, right? So of course, now we're talking about biomedical research and the ethics related to it, right? It's very expensive and a very time-consuming process, right? So it's interesting. Sometimes when you get the sense that more money has been put into something, sometimes you might feel a little bit more confident about it. A lot of money is spent on what he's going to reveal is homeopathy. Okay, let's continue.
Two questions I would like to ask these people if I had the opportunity to do so. First question, if I want to ask them to call up, because they do hear them through the ear, they listen to the spirits like this. I'm going to ask you to call up the ghost of my grandmother, because when she died, she had the family will. Any useful information to us. We paid a lot of money there.
There we go.
Now, this is a process that is called cold reading.
Oh yeah, here we go.
You stop breathing, and then you're dazed only about 20 minutes or so, and then the people look in the mirror and they say, I just paid a lot of money for that reading, and what did she say to me? I love you. They always say that. They don't get any information, they don't get any value for what they spend. Now, Sylvia Brown is the big operator. We call her
don't get any value for what they spend.
Right? Sylvia Brown, thank you, for that $700. She gives you the names of your guardian angels, and we haven't heard from her since. Strange.
Sorry about skipping through.
She said it, first of all, sleeping pills. I forgot to tell you that.
There we go. There we go.
Faith to these people.
Okay.
Now, I popped some pills earlier. I have to explain that to you. Homeopathy. Let's find out what that's all about. You've heard of it. It's an alternative form of healing, right? Homeopathy actually consists, and that's what this is. This is Calms Forte, 32 caplets of sleeping pills. I forgot to tell you that. I just ingested 6.5 days worth of sleeping pills. 6.5 days, that certainly is a fatal dose. It says right on the back here, in case of overdose, contact your poison control center immediately, and it gives an 800 number. Keep your seats, it's gonna be okay. I don't really need it. Because I've been doing this stunt for audiences all over the world for the last 8 or 10 years, taking fatal doses of homeopathic sleeping pills. Why don't they affect me? The answer may surprise you. What is homeopathy? It's taking a medicine that really works and diluting it down, well beyond Avogadro's limit, diluting it down to the point where there's none of it left. Now, folks, this is not just a metaphor I'm going to give you now. It's true. It's exactly equivalent to taking one 325 milligram aspirin tablet, throwing it into the middle of Lake Tahoe, and then stirring it up, obviously with a very big stick, and waiting 2 years or so until the solution is homogeneous. Then when you get a headache, you take a sip of this water, and voila, it is gone. Now, that is true. That is what homeopathy is all about. And another claim that they make, you'll love this one. The more dilute the medicine is, they say, the more powerful it is. Now, wait a minute. We heard about a guy in Florida, the poor man. He was on homeopathic medicine. He died of an overdose. He forgot to take his pill. Work on it. Work on it. It's a ridiculous thing. It is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what we're doing.
Okay, so I'm just going to pause real fast. So, and in fact, I think we'll be done with this video because he's kind of made his point. So the way homeopathy works is you take some kind of substance. Sometimes it's actually a poison, but then again, a lot of drugs are they're poisons, but in very, very small amounts that can actually be helpful in some way. And the poisons are again in small amounts. But with homeopathic remedies, what they do is they will take a very, very tiny amount, and then they'll dilute it many, many times. And so sometimes what they do is they put it in like a test tube full of water or some kind of neutral substance, and they'll tap it, right? And then they'll take a drop from that test tube and put that in another test tube just of water, tap, 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 tap that, and they'll take a drop of that and put it in another test tube of water until, as you can imagine, it's the original substance is diluted many, many times until really there's only a limited probability that there's even one molecule of the poison left in this stuff. All right, so the idea is that this is supposed to heal you, but anyway, I think it's fairly clear. You could do your own research on this. If you look at peer-reviewed studies of the effects of homeopathic remedies, they're no better than placebos. Right? You believe that they're going to help you, and so they do. But as James Randi demonstrates here, it's if you don't believe that they're going to help you, then they're not really going to help you, right? Because there's really nothing in them that's actually going to have the actual effect that it claims. Okay, so there are a number of reasons to distrust certain things, right? And James Randi is trying to show that our distrust of homeopathy is well directed, right? So is well directed at homeopathy. We are right to distrust homeopathy because of the process by which it is developed. Okay, so just transpose that over to our thinking about vaccines and the development of vaccines, right? Notice there are some analogies with how vaccines are developed. Analogies, it's not exactly the same in some very important ways, but the way, and oh yeah, let me go to the next source that I've got for us to take a look at. Back up here. Oh, you'll notice all of this is again on D2L in that little sub-module called COVID-19 vaccine studies, right? So this is the first one we just saw. And then I want to go over this very helpful overview by the World Health Organization about how vaccines are developed. Some of you, those of you who are nursing students, are probably pretty familiar with this, but I just want to kind of share a little bit about it. Notice, so sometimes learning about what goes into a vaccine can feel, when some people are aware of it, some people can feel kind of put off by it. But this article explains some of the reasons why these ingredients are there, right? So preservatives so that it doesn't decay, stabilizers so that that everything kind of remains coherent and so forth. And notice there's this little this little egg for the for one of the ingredients, and that's because a protein will help. Now I'm going to scroll down a little bit just to kind of skim this article. Yeah, here we go. Stabilizers prevent chemical reactions from occurring within the vaccine. So when you make a vaccine, you don't want it to kind of fall apart, or you don't want it to react with anything inside the vaccine. Remember, this is something that came from an actual, virus, or that resembles, or is the same kind of thing as a virus, which is, contagious or can infect people. So you want to keep the vaccine components from sticking to the vaccine vial and so forth. Stabilizers can be sugars, amino acids, gelatin, and proteins, right? This is one of the reasons why when you get a vaccine, you're asked sometimes whether you have certain kinds of allergies and so forth, right? Because some of that stuff goes along with the vaccine. Okay, so all these ingredients. For people who are skeptical of this kind of thing, this can look like, and it has been described as like a witch's brew of all kinds of crazy, unnecessary ingredients, maybe ingredients that are unhealthy or that are designed to control us or subdue us or keep us passive, right? Keep us almost kind of zombified or hypnotized, or maintain our belief in vaccines as effective, right? That can be how it's perceived, right? From people who might not be very well informed about why vaccines are effective, right? Okay, so then how are vaccines developed? And again, many of you are probably familiar with this if you've taken some courses in research, healthcare research. But what first has to happen is, bless you, it's okay. What first has to happen is, of course, you make sure that it's safe in animals. We've talked about this in previous classes, right? If it's safe in animals, and especially animals that are closely related biologically to humans, then that increases the chances that they'll be safe in human beings, right? So you got to test them in animals first. Again, something we talked about previously. We dealt with some of the ethical issues of testing in animals too, right? Then you start to try it in human beings, but not a whole bunch of human beings all at once. You start with a limited number of human beings, just in case things go wrong, right? If things go wrong, you don't want to get it going with a lot of people. You want to test it in a few. So this is called phase 1 trials. The vaccine is given to a small number of volunteers to assess its safety, confirm it generates an immune response, and determine the right dosage. Right? Generally, in this phase, vaccines are tested in young, healthy adult volunteers, right? So they don't want anybody who has a compromised immune system or anything like that. Healthy volunteers. All right. So you're still kind of checking for safety, right? But also for effectiveness, right? And if it doesn't pass phase 1 trials, then it won't be allowed to go on to phase 2. Phase 2, you broaden the population in your study, you broaden your sample size, and you're looking at, there's more variation among them, right? So although, well, sometimes they still have the same kinds of features, but when you have a larger population, you're going to have more even more variation. And then phase 3 is designed for as much diversity as possible, right? So that way, you test for whether it's likely to be effective and safe in people with different sorts of medical histories. Okay, so as you can imagine, this takes quite some time, and it's a very involved process. And for people who don't quite understand it, people who don't quite understand it may be in two different blocks. People who don't understand it and trust scientists and doctors, or people who don't understand it and distrust scientists and doctors. Right? So which sort of block will we end up being in? So think about the ways in which people in the public might be persuaded either way. What would it take to persuade people that vaccines, especially as developed in this way, are safe, right? And it takes some level of understanding of the scientific method, the idea of experimenting and testing and so forth. Right? Okay, so I wanted to share that. And also this as a way of, let's see, excuse me. So when they tried this with COVID-19, now COVID-19, the vaccine for this has been record breaking, partially because this is the worst pandemic the world has faced since 1918, right? Since the Spanish flu. So in more than 100 years, we haven't had anything this bad that has been this deadly and this contagious together. And I think in the news, just I kind of as I speak, or just yesterday, we had in the United States more deaths than ever, right, with COVID-19. So this thing has not been going away. That means, yes, more deaths in a day than we had even when this thing began, right? So this is it's worse. Now, part of the reason for that is that it's reaching new populations, right? That have not been exposed to COVID-19. That's one of the reasons. But a lot of the time, those populations had gotten a little bit complacent, right? They said, "Oh, we don't think it's that bad." There had been a lot of misinformation shared about COVID-19, and so unfortunately, those populations that were more susceptible to the misinformation about COVID-19 were much more vulnerable to it. And now, another statistic that you might find fairly alarming, and when you run the numbers, considering the population of North Dakota, this is another fairly disturbing and unsettling statistic. 1 in 800, so more than 1,500. So 1 in 800 residents of North Dakota has died of COVID-19. 1 in 800. So if you live in North Dakota, statistically, your odds of dying from COVID-19 are 1 in 800. And that's really bad. So anyway, it's really affecting. And this is just to kind of back this out, or to zoom out of this point, is that information, reliable information versus misinformation, can very much be a life or death issue, and it's certainly that we are certainly seeing that uh, with uh, with this pandemic. Okay, so let me go ahead and share this. This is a article kind of describing the first trial, the first phase 1 trial of a vaccine. Now there are different companies, different organizations that are developing vaccines, right? They're trying different kinds of methods or approaches, or well, similar methods, but um, different kinds of combinations of those different ingredients that I had showed you in the WHO article. So first human trial of COVID-19 vaccine finds it is safe and induces rapid immune response. I'm just going to go down quickly to here. Let me see. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Now, sometimes one of the bits of misinformation that we sometimes see is that, and sometimes see this repeated, unfortunately, is that some people think that vaccines cause more harm than good, right? Or that the side effects are worse than the actual disease, right? That's one of the rumors that sometimes is spread, and this belief just kind of like settles in people, and they just kind of go about their lives just making this assumption, right? Or another bit of misinformation that we've received is that COVID-19 is just as bad as the flu, right? No, statistically, the flu kills between 12,000 and 6,000 or 60,000 approximately. I mean, there are some years when it's worse, some years when it's better, or not better, but less bad. Um, when the flu kills, between 12,000 and 60,000 per year. On bad years, it can kill up to 60,000 Americans. On not so bad years, the strains of the flu can kill, about 12,000 Americans. All right, COVID-19 in less than a year has killed more than 260,000 Americans. So in terms of mortality, COVID-19 is at least 4 times as deadly as the flu, at least, right? And the deaths are not going away, unfortunately. So anyway, just right there, with those bits of information, we can see that COVID-19 is quite deadly and quite serious. Okay, so just a little bit of a description. Common adverse reactions to the COVID-19 vaccine that is discussed here. Common adverse reactions were mild pain at the injection site, right? That's fairly typical. In over half of vaccine recipients, okay, fever, fatigue, headache, muscle pain in 17% of the volunteers, the participants. Oh, I should say another reason, and this is kind of getting into the more of the moral principles. I'll just continue with this paragraph, and then I gotta put a pin in that. Put a pin in it. Put a needle in it. One participant given the higher dose vaccine reported severe fever, along with severe symptoms of fatigue, shortness of breath. Right, that's one of the symptoms of COVID-19, and muscle pain. However, these adverse reactions persisted for less than 48 hours. Right. Okay, so no deaths, it seems, right here. Whereas if it were actually COVID-19, if it were the actual disease, you might expect to see perhaps 1 death, right? But no. Anyway, so it looks like, and this was just the very beginning. This phase 1 trial. This one vaccine that had been developed. This also dates back to May. So this is quite, May 22nd, right? So it dates back some time. So by now, right, there's been more testing, right? There's been more assurance of the safety of this thing. So people who would argue that vaccines are just as bad or worse than the actual disease just simply don't know the numbers, right? Approved vaccines are always safer than the actual disease, right? The actual virus. So that's something that's very important. Now, of course, sometimes there are adverse effects of a vaccine, as we can see here, for example, with this phase 1 trial. Sometimes there are, on rare occasions, that those reactions result in a death, but those deaths are much rarer than the actual virus. So, and unfortunately, sometimes people who are spreading misinformation about vaccines will focus on those cases where there are adverse effects of the vaccine. They'll focus on those cases and say, hey, look how bad the vaccine is. However, they are ignoring the adverse effects of the actual disease itself, if you get like the actual virus. They have to ignore that in order to try to persuade us that vaccines are harmful. All right, so the most common adverse reactions were, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I read that already. Within 2 weeks of vaccination, all dose levels of the vaccine triggered some level of immune response, all right, in the form of binding antibodies, right? So in other words, it does provide immunity, some level of immunity to SARS-CoV-2, right? So COVID-19. All right, so just to share that, this kind of goes over the experiment, explains some of the results, and basically shows scientifically that at least for this in this one study, that so far this vaccine that's being developed seems to be safe and seems to be effective, right? And then of course this is only phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and so forth, and then it can go to production, right? And it looks like we're very close to that in the United States, to the production level. Okay, let me go back to this. All right, so imagine or think about what it might take, right? So there's the science, right? There's the experiments. Sometimes, though, people feel kind of distant from that. Oh, I remember the thing that I was going to put a pin in, right? I remember. So, one of the reasons why vaccines and drugs in general take so long to develop is because not only is it the case that you have to find healthy volunteers, but they have to go through, a number of, well, they have to meet certain criteria, right? You have to make sure that they don't have any sort of medical history that could interfere with the results or produce or add some variables to your experiment that you don't necessarily want. You want to try to, keep it, have as few variables as possible, right? You want everything controlled except for that one variable, which is the people who got the vaccine, right? And then of course the different dosages may be different in different uh, participants. So you need that. You need to make sure that the medical history is square. They have to, volunteer just as with other, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, just as with other kinds of medical treatment, they need to give informed consent. Autonomy is very important. Now, when we're talking about trials, when we're talking about clinical trials for a drug, they also need to be made aware that they have every right to end the study for any reason whatsoever at any time. They can say, all right, I'm done with this. I don't want to participate in the study anymore. And they're fully within their rights to do that. So sometimes people do end the study, right? So there is that. And there's a lot of things that you have to find the right volunteers and meet the specifications, and you have to actually administer it. You have to follow them for a month or so to make sure that there are no adverse effects. That takes time. So finding the volunteers, administering, checking their backgrounds, and so forth. Okay, so anyway, this article was way back in May. Now we're in December, and it looks like we have at least 3 fairly promising vaccines that have been developed one in the UK under a study done at the University of Oxford, but then there are also 2 that were developed by pharmaceutical companies here in the United States, with international funding and so forth. And they have various degrees of effectiveness, but it looks like we are very much closing in on a vaccine. Okay. So one of the ways, so there's the science, right? And again, not everybody will follow the science. Not everybody will read the information. Not everybody will receive the information well. Sometimes the person who tells somebody else that a vaccine is safe is not credible. Like somebody is very suspicious of somebody who says, "Hey, look at the science." All right, but maybe one of the strongest ways to demonstrate to people that the vaccine is safe and effective is to put your body where your mouth is, right? We hear the expression, put your money where your mouth is. Well, some people will put their body where their mouth is. If people really do believe that the scientific method is the surest way we have to determining the truth about something in nature, then people who respect the scientific method and trust the process will say, well, I am not a trained scientist. I am not a trained biologist or epidemiologist. I don't work in a pharmaceutical company, but I do trust the scientists, and so I will go ahead and do this. This is why this kind of caught my eye, and this is very recent. I think this just came out today. Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and who's the other guy? George Bush Jr. So the 3 of them, are taking a leadership role by saying that the 3 of them would be willing to get the vaccine. Once the vaccine is developed and ready to go, they will get it. All right, who better to promote a product than a former president? How about three, right? So this is the article. This is from NPR. It's the NPR's depiction of it. All right, former presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton are willing to lend their star power for a good cause, right? So they're saying basically, we really do think this vaccine is safe and effective. Look, we're going to help go ahead and get it, right? So this is interesting because you might say that you could say that that's kind of a risk, but they don't think that they're taking very much of a risk because the people who were taking the risk were the people in the phase 1 trials, the people in the phase 2 trials, the people in the phase 3 trials, right? They were the ones taking the risks, right? And it turns out it's safe and effective. So this is one of the reasons why I felt fine getting a flu shot earlier this flu season, and I will get the vaccine if it becomes available or if I'm next in line for it, and so forth. Partially to protect myself, of course, but also to protect those around me. I've had conversations with people who are who avoid vaccines, and of course, absolutely will not get the COVID-19 vaccine, and so forth. And my response to that is that it's fine. Nobody can force you to take the vaccine. I will explain why I think it's safe and effective. I will show you the science and so forth, and or also make it more personal by offering my own explanation, my own layman's explanation of it. But also, even if you don't take the vaccine, you will still benefit from me and many other people taking the vaccine. Because I mean, even though sometimes we kind of denigrate people who don't take a vaccine as free riders, because they still benefit from the immunity that we get from the vaccination. That's fine. They don't have to. Now remember, when we're thinking about autonomy, right? It's their bodies. We cannot force them to take something into their body or expel something from their body that they don't want, right? So their body belongs to them. They have complete autonomy over it. So nobody can be forced to get a vaccine. That will never happen. I know there are some people who are concerned about that. It's just not going to happen. I'm a major proponent of vaccines, and I think many of you are as well. But I will defend people's right to decline the vaccine, right? Because I favor autonomy, really over all else. Right? Okay. Now we have gone over cases where it's acceptable or warranted or morally justified to override people's autonomy, to use hard paternalism. We had seen those cases. Now, one of those cases where you might force somebody against their will to do something, violate somebody's autonomy directly, one of those cases is when they pose a significant risk to themselves or to others, right? To harming themselves or harming others. And this is something that I want to maybe play out in discussion, right? So the discussion forum that I've opened up about this. Is it the case? Is the risk of harm significant enough that we could violate people's autonomy by forcing people to take a vaccine, right? Is the risk significant enough? Right? Is this one of those cases where hard paternalism is warranted? Right? I think most other bioethicists would argue that it's not a case in which hard paternalism is warranted for a couple of reasons. Number one, yeah, a lot of people are dying, but the number of people dying isn't necessarily as disastrous or catastrophic as we might have feared. That's one aspect of it, in my humble opinion. But yes, there are a lot of people who are dying. However, we're not into it is a significant number, and I don't want to dismiss the deaths. However, it's something that is manageable. And I hate to use that kind of technocratic word for it. I'm sorry about that. But I would generally, before we start to use actual hard paternalism, I would expect the deaths to be more significant, right? Second of all, another reason why I don't think it's acceptable to use hard paternalism in this case, or to violate people's autonomy, is because, and it's left me. I had two reasons in mind. Where is this one? I can't think of it. It's so funny. There's another good reason why we should not violate people's autonomy in this case. And I can't. Oh yeah. All right. The other reason is that the people who do choose to take it, there will be enough people who choose to take the vaccine that the people who choose not to will still be more protected than they otherwise would be. So, so there are enough people who are volunteering to take the vaccine that it mitigates the effect of the virus for those who don't. So, in other words, it'll minimize the harm. With the volunteers who do take the vaccine is going to minimize the amount of harm that those who don't take it will inflict on others. So I think those two elements or those two aspects of this crisis mean that this is not a case where we should violate people's autonomy and inflict hard paternalism on them. Soft paternalism, maybe, maybe, and I sort of just talked about this. You could say that that the three former presidents taking the vaccine, you could say that's a form of soft paternalism, right? So it's a kind of persuasive technique, right? We are hoping to nudge our population towards exception towards accepting this the vaccine as safe and effective. Okay, I've probably talked too much. But consider this, right? So think about the moral principles that we had looked at. Think about the moral theories, right? If we were to impose hard paternalism, that would definitely be justified under utilitarian principles. Utilitarianism is trying to maximize the good, do what's in the best interest of the whole population writ large. So some utilitarians might say, yeah, we should force people to take the vaccine. But of course, Kantians would say, no, we can't force them to do that. Right? We would be, basically, if I force somebody to take the vaccine to protect the public, I'm using that person as a means to an end. Kant says, no, we cannot do that. All right, so think through the moral theories there. Think about through the moral principles: autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and one of the issues related to non-maleficence. We want to make sure that the vaccine is safe, that we're not going to hurt people by giving them the vaccine. Or we could think about it this way: is the amount of harm that they may suffer as a result of taking the vaccine, does the benefit justify the maleficence, the harm? And also think about ethics of think about the principle of justice, about distribution. And here you could ask the question about, should the vaccine be subsidized by the government? Should it be made freely available? Right? And I think many people would argue, yes, it should. That the government should pay for the population to get the vaccine. And in a sense, even if it were out of self-interest that the government paid for everybody to get the vaccine, that would also justify it, because the cost of more people dying, the cost of more hospitalizations, and all of the problems that have been caused by the virus, that's very, very expensive. So it's probably cheaper to go ahead and pay for the vaccine and prevent all those hospitalizations and all those deaths later on, right? So there seems as though there are many, many good reasons for the vaccine to be made free, to be subsidized by the government. Okay, all right, I've exhausted my time, and so I'm going to put this video up, and please watch this video, and I look forward to your comments in the discussion forum, and hope that you have actually, since this is technically our last sort of class, I do want to say, as I usually do at the end of a class, articulate how much I've enjoyed our discussions. I've really enjoyed engaging with all of you. I really do learn some new things every semester, and I get some new insights, and I understand some new perspectives from people, and especially considering in your particular section, the array of students who from different fields, right, and different specializations within the nursing field, but also people who are outside of nursing, who have other kinds of career goals, other sorts of vocations that are interested in and will be helped by a class like this in bioethics. I've really appreciated your contributions to our discussions, and just want to thank you for taking this course with me. Let me know if you're having any ongoing difficulties with your final research paper. I will be watching my email carefully for any correspondence, and if you need to meet via Zoom, I'm very happy to do that as well. All right, take care and be safe and stay healthy, stay warm, and enjoy the sun outside today. Thanks. And this is the part where I figure out how to stop recording. There we go.